So 9.3, day 1 is the surface area of pyramids and cones. We're just going to review real fast by finding the surface area of a cylinder. A factory is preparing to manufacture several thousand aluminum barrels with the dimensions shown below. Find the surface area of the barrel to the nearest tenth of a foot. So this is a cylinder. So 2 pi r, which our radius is 1, squared, plus 2 times pi times r times our height of the cylinder, which is 6. So when we plug that into our calculator, we get a surface area of 43.96 feet squared. All right. An important part in today's lesson for finding the surface area of pyramids and cones is identifying the height and the slant height. And these are different. So the height, as you can see here, is the straight up and down height. Think of this like the doctor measures your height and you stand straight up and down when the doctor measures your height. You're never going to lean over to have them measure your height. So the height is the straight up and down distance from the base to the vertex. And remember, this vertex is called the apex in a pyramid, right there. So from the base to the apex. Now the slant height, on the other hand, which we use a script letter L to identify. You don't want to use a lowercase l because it looks like a 1. It's the height of any of the slanted faces. So get it slant height for the slant. So this is the slant height. Okay, whereas this is the straight up and down height. So even for a pyramid, this is the slant height. Okay, so slant height is on a slant. Height is the straight up and down height, as if your doctor would measure your height. Very important to know the difference. Now, if you're given one and not the other, we use the Pythagorean theorem to find the other one. So you might be given the height and have to find the slant height, or vice versa. So for example, here we have this triangle. We have the straight up and down height, which is 100. We have this side of the triangle, which is actually going to be half the side length of the base. So the side length of the base is 200. So this is half of that, which is 100. And then we don't know what the slant height is. So we'll call that L, and that's what we're going to try to find. And so to find the slant height, we have a right triangle, and we use Pythagorean theorem to find a missing side length in a right triangle. So across from my 90-degree angle is always going to be the slant height. So it's always going to be slant height squared equals the height squared plus half the side length squared. So S stands for side length divided by 2, since it's half. So in this example, we have the slant height squared. So remember, slant height will always be the hypotenuse every time. My straight up and down height, h, is 100. So 100 squared. And my, we already said half the side length is 100. So plus this side, which is 100 squared. Okay, so we're just using the Pythagorean theorem in a right triangle. Now I suggest just taking the square root of both sides, and therefore we get L, and then we just type that into our calculator in one step. I think that's the easiest. So square root of 100 squared plus 100 squared gives us a slant height of 141.42 feet. And slant height is 1 dimension, so it's just feet. So the surface area of a pyramid, we're going to find the area of the base, which in this case happens to be a rectangle, and then we're going to add it to the lateral area. So how do we find those things? We call the area of the base big B, same thing as we always have been, and then the lateral area is the perimeter of the base times the slant height, all divided by 2. So again, the perimeter of the base times the slant height, all divided by 2. So notice we don't even use the straight up and down height in the area in the surface area formula. So here we have a pyramid. So again, let me write out that formula. big B plus P times L divided by 2. So the area of my base is 6 times 6, which is 36. Okay, the perimeter of my base is 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6, which is 24. The slant height, oh, they didn't give it to me, so we're going to have to calculate that, and then we'll divide that by 2. So slant height, remember, is always the hypotenuse. So slant height squared equals my straight up and down height, which is 4, so 4 squared, plus this side squared. And this side is half the length of the base. So 6, half of that is 3, so plus 3 squared. Okay, and then you can do it in 3 different steps, but I find it easiest to just take the square root of both sides. Therefore, we get L equals, and type that in your calculator in 1 step. Square root of 4 squared plus 3 squared equals 5. So our slant height is 5. So L equals 5. We'll plug that in here. Okay, and from there, I would plug this in a couple steps. I would do 24 times 5 first, which is 120 divided by 2, and a half of 120 is 60. So add those together and we get 96. It's surface area, so area is always squared. So our surface area of this pyramid is 96 feet squared. All right, 2 more examples. We already have the slant height in A, so you can see it's on a slant. And they actually already gave me big B, so that actually makes it a lot easier on us. So I'll write out the formula. Okay, big B, they told us is 35.1. The perimeter, well, if you see these marks, the red marks, it means all 3 sides of the triangle are the same length, and they're 9. So 9 plus 9 plus 9 is 27 for the perimeter of the base. The slant height they already gave me, which is 12, all divided by 2. So then we would type in 27 times 12. We would take that number and divide it by 2. So let's see, that is 27 times 2. Or sorry, 27 times 12, sorry, is 324. Divided by 2 is 162. Oops, that's a plus sign. So we're going to add those 2 together to get 197.1 centimeters squared for the surface area. All right, the next one, we don't have the slant height, so we're going to have to calculate it using the Pythagorean theorem. So remember, slant height's always the hypotenuse, so hypotenuse squared equals straight up and down height squared plus, okay, if this side length's 10, then this is half of that, which is 5, so plus 5 squared. Square root both sides to get L by itself, and we'll just type that in our calculator. The square root of 12 squared plus 5 squared. And we get 13. So my slant height here is 13. Okay, so the area of my base, big B, I'll write it out. Okay, big B, 10 times 10 is 100. The perimeter of my base is 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10, which is 40, times the slant height, which we found was 13. And then this part's divided by 2. So 40 times 13 is 520. 520 divided by 2 is 260. So that's 360 feet, is it feet? Yep, feet squared for the surface area of this pyramid. So that's pyramids. Oops, you're often going to have to find the slant height, but sometimes you will be given the slant height. So now let's look at cones. Finding the slant height of a cone, very similar. Again, the slant height's always going to be the hypotenuse across from the 90-degree angle. So slant height squared equals the straight up and down height squared, so that's the same. The only part that's different than a pyramid is that this third side is just going to be the radius squared. So it's a bit easier than the pyramids. So the surface area for a cone, well, the area of a base, the base of a cone is a circle. So the area of the base is pi r squared, and there's only one circle there. And then the lateral area is pi times r times L. So we're only plugging in r, the radius, and L, the slant height. So I'll write that out again. Pi r squared plus pi rl. Okay, our radius here is 4. So pi times 4 squared plus pi times 4 times the slant height, which is 6. You see that's on a slant, so we didn't actually have to calculate it there, which is really nice. And now we're just going to type this into our calculators in one step. So pi, and please use the pi button instead of 3.14. So pi times 4 squared plus pi times 4 times 6. So we get 125.6. Actually, this 6 will round this up to a 7. So 125. Actually, let's keep it to 2 decimal places. We'll go 125.66 inches squared. Remember, surface area. Area means your units are squared. All right, this next one, we don't know the slant height. So slant height is always the hypotenuse. So hypotenuse squared equals straight up and down height squared plus the radius squared. In this case, our radius is 12, so plus 12 squared. So let's square root both sides to get L by itself. And then we're just going to type this part in our calculator. The square root of 5 squared plus 12 squared. And we get 13 again. So slant height here is 13. All right, so pi times our radius, which is 12 squared, plus pi times our radius times our slant height, which is 13. So again, that's just the formula, pi r squared plus pi rl. So let's plug that into our calculators to find the surface area. Pi r squared plus pi times r times L. And we get 942.48. So that 7 is going to round this up to an 8. So 942.48. And that's going to be feet squared. All right, pause this video. You go ahead and try, and then unpause it, and you can check your answer. So for this one, we have pi r squared plus pi times our slant height, which is 12. So we didn't have to calculate the slant height there. So we get a surface area of 690.8 inches squared. You should round to 2 decimal places, but I didn't type that in my calculator, so hopefully you get something close to that. All right, and then the second you try, you had to find the slant height. So hypotenuse squared equals radius squared plus the straight up and down height squared. Square root both sides, and you get the slant height of 5. So pi times my radius squared plus pi times my radius times my slant height of 5. So that's the formula. When you plug that into your calculator, you get a surface area of 75.36 centimeters squared. And I actually think that's the answer when using 3.14 instead of pi. So yours might look a little bit different, but make sure you use the pi button and not 3.14 because then we're rounding too much. So let's just plug it in. We'll see what we get. So for the first U-try problem, 10 and 12. So pi times 10 squared plus pi times 10 times 12. So for that one, 691.15. So yeah, you can see it's a bit different. So that's why we don't round, because that's off quite a bit. And then the second one, 3 and 5. So pi times 3 squared plus pi times 3 times 5. And that gives us a surface area of 75.398. So that 8 rounds the 9 up, which rounds the 3 up to a 4. So 75.40 centimeters squared. Using the pi button. So that's better. Do not use 3.14. Make sure you use the pi button.